As a leader, the direction made sense. The value was real, and the case for you expanding was sound. But what was never fully understood before the commitment was made is whether the market you were going after would have any reason to let you in. And these marketplaces can show up in different ways. Sometimes you're going after a certain niche. Sometimes it shows up as a larger client move, a partner strategy or new referral channel, or even an attempt to step into a broader role. And this form can always change, but the exposure doesn't, because you felt you could step in and win. But the market, it already decided otherwise. I spent 23 consecutive years in the top 1% of the wealth management industry as an advisor, leader, and executive, building and running multi-billion-dollar businesses. So what are you going to learn today? 1, why the market you're entering matters more than the direction you're bringing it to. 2, how the market evaluates expansion through disruption, not value. 3, why alignment will always look real while the behavior stays anchored. And 4, what it looks like when a direction flattens without ever failing. To you, the direction feels earned. You've built something real. You built a strong core business, real relationships, and a team that delivers. And the expansion you're planning makes sense because there's a segment worth going after, a broader role you believe your team is ready to play. And the logic holds and the upside is clear, so you commit to it. And your core business stays fully live while you build toward this in parallel. And you're prepared for the weight of running both. And early on, the signals feel right. Your partners engage around the direction. Your clients appreciate the expanded capability. And nobody pushes back on the logic. And the conversations are warm and the reception is genuine. So you keep moving. Your team is in the conversations, doing all the work. And what they bring back is honest. They're not managing the message. But the message that you get back isn't what you expected. The clients, they acknowledge the capability. They appreciate the offer. And then they continue doing business exactly the way they've always been. Because they already have someone for that need. And the one you're describing, they already have somewhere else. Nothing is said directly. So the team goes deeper into the rooms, the events, the spaces where this kind of direction actually has to live. And that's when the picture shifts in a way that's harder to explain away. Because when your team gets into these rooms, when your team is sitting alongside the people already embedded there, you start seeing who else is in the market. And those are people that do nothing else. Teams whose entire operating model is built around that client, that role, that need. Partners who already have trusted paths, relationships that were built years before you arrived. And your team, they're building towards this alongside everything else. And the people in that space aren't evaluating whether your team is capable. You're evaluating whether the capability that's divided is worth choosing over capability that's total. And the reports from your team starts coming back and it starts confirming it. A partner engagement where everything looked aligned, the value was clear, the introduction was warm, the opportunity looked real, and your team goes in prepared. And what comes back is that the partner already has an arrangement and it works. And they're not looking to change how they route their clients. Then you have your clients who already have structure around that need. And nobody was difficult. Nobody pushed back. They just didn't move. No argument, no bad meeting, no resistance. Just a market that already had what it needed and didn't see a reason to reorganize around what was being offered. And that's when it lands to you. Not because it was the worst report the team brought back, because it was the clearest. You realize the space wasn't empty. It was already organized. And you and the team were never prepared for what was actually already inside it. And here's some of the things that you didn't see. 1, the tolerance for disruption was mispriced. The direction that you built was around the value it would create, but the market evaluated the cost of changing to receive it. And those are not the same calculations. Your existing clients, they could see the benefit and it didn't move because the relationship they had was already working. And your external process could evaluate the capability and still choose the people already embedded in the space because depth that's divided doesn't complete with depth that's total. Nobody said no directly, but the direction didn't face resistance, it faced inertia. And inertia doesn't argue, it doesn't challenge the logic, it doesn't tell you it disagrees. It just stays where it is. And even though you thought you improved the offering, the environment protected disruption. The second thing was alignment was mistaken for willingness. The support for you was real. The agreement was genuine. And when the direction was introduced, people understood it. And they could see the logic, the benefit statement landed, and they nodded. But those were signals of approval, not signals of adoption. And you read them as movement, but they were just consensus. And that distinction matters more than most leaders want to sit with, because the people around you are skilled at being supportive without committing to change. And the partner you work with can understand the value completely and still route business the same way. And a client, they can appreciate the expanded capability and still stay exactly where they are. Because alignment stays verbal, but behavior stays anchored. and the willingness was never there. It just wasn't visible from your seat because the early recession that you got felt close enough to movement to keep your belief intact. The third reason was the value was evaluated through continuity, not through capability. Because from your seat, the value felt obvious. You built the case very well. The benefit statement was real and their upside to you was genuine. But everyone else was running a different calculation. Not, is this better? But does accepting this make my situation easier or harder to manage? That existing client already had someone for that need. Changing it meant transition, explanation, and introducing complexity into a relationship that was already working. That external prospect was choosing between a team building towards this and a team that has never done anything else. So they didn't question competence. They questioned whether the change was worth reorienting around. And to them, that added depth that your team would have brought felt optional, not required. Because that value they had already existed and necessity didn't. And behavior follows necessity, not value. And finally, role necessity was assumed, not proven. You assumed that direction would create demand for an expanded version of that role, that stepping into that space would open it. But what you never fully vetted is whether the market actually had a gap, whether partners had something that your team could genuinely fill, whether your clients in that space had a need not already served by someone else who had spent years building specifically for them. And you felt you could step in and win, but the market evaluated whether their role was necessary enough to displace what has already been there. And it wasn't. So instead of having expansion, you experienced containment. The market kept you exactly where it had always placed you. The role they had you in before the direction launched was a role they had you after. And that space wasn't empty, and no one was waiting for you to arrive. And that's where this makes this very expensive at your level. Because it doesn't surface as a clean failure. It surfaces as a plateau. Because your core business kept moving, the team kept executing, and the numbers didn't collapse. And because nothing breaks cleanly, there's no single moment that forced the question out loud. But the parallel effort was real. The time, the events, the training, the relationship capital invested in building towards a space that never fully opened. And that cost was accumulating the entire time, while the signals were still warm enough to keep belief intact. And that's what makes it most expensive, because everyone was comfortable keeping you where you were. And comfort is the hardest signal to see when you're expecting movement. And it only became clear to you once the team started bringing back what the market was already saying. And you had to sit with the fact that they already fully committed to a space they never fully understood. Because the market already made its call before the first conversation ever happened. Everything after that was you working against a decision the market already made and never communicated directly. And that was the miss. And it was sitting there before the plan that you created was ever in motion. And this is what I watch for. Not whether the direction was sound, not whether the team executed, and not whether the benefit statement was built correctly, but whether you did the real work before you committed. Understand the market that you were stepping into, what it actually needed, who was actually in it, and whether your team had the depth to compete against people who had been spending years building nothing else. Either be the partner who already had an arrangement that worked and no reason to change it. It could be in the room full of people who do nothing else, and the reports coming back with no argument and no movement. And these moments, they don't arrive before the commitment. They arrive after, when the team is already invested, when the relationship is already leaned on, and when the cost is already running. And that's what makes this the most expensive assumption at this level, because you felt you could step in and win, but the market already decided. And at Elite Fate, this is the line we watch closely. Because in a world full of information, people choose authority that protects them from being wrong at the most expensive moments. Every week I break down the real strategy behind top performers, wealth advisors, and leaders ready to operate at the level they've been built for. This is Elite Fate. We cut through the fluff, no hype, no theory, just strategy, psychology, and execution. If this hits home, subscribe. You're not just watching and learning. You will become the model others follow.